What if one of the most beloved films ever made was nearly derailed before a single frame was shot? Forrest Gump is the kind of movie that feels effortless, warm, funny, and deeply human. But behind that simplicity lies a story of extraordinary risks, last-minute decisions, and hidden craftsmanship that most viewers never suspect. From groundbreaking visual tricks to casting choices that almost never happened, every layer of this film holds a secret worth uncovering. And it all started with a gamble so bold, most people in Hollywood thought it was financial madness. Number 1. The $60 million salary gamble. Before the cameras even rolled, a decision was made that would either pay off brilliantly or leave two of the most talented people in Hollywood with nothing to show for their work. Tom Hanks and director Robert Zemeckis both agreed to forego their standard upfront salaries in exchange for a share of the film's gross profits. It was a bold move, and at the time, a genuinely risky one. The difference between gross and net profits in Hollywood is enormous. Gross profit participation means a cut of total revenue before the studio deducts expenses, while net profits, notoriously manipulated through creative accounting, often leave participants with almost nothing. By securing gross profit deals, both men positioned themselves to benefit directly from every ticket sold, every VHS rented, and every television deal signed. When Forrest Gump became a cultural phenomenon, grossing over $678 million worldwide against a $55 million budget, that gamble turned into one of the most lucrative decisions in Hollywood history. Both men reportedly earned upward of $40 million each from their back-end deals alone. It was a masterclass in understanding how the industry really works, and a lesson that Winston Groom, the film's original author, would learn the hard way. Number 2. The feather was carefully controlled. The opening feather shot is one of cinema's most memorable images, a single white feather drifting lazily through the air before landing at Forrest's feet. What appears to be a happy accident of nature was actually one of the most precisely engineered shots in the entire production. Nothing about that feather was left to chance. The visual effects team used early digital compositing techniques to map out every frame of the feather's movement. A real feather was filmed separately against a controlled background, and its path was then carefully tracked and integrated into the scene using software that was, at the time, still relatively new to Hollywood. The goal was to create the illusion of randomness, something that paradoxically required complete control to achieve. Beyond its technical construction, the feather carries enormous symbolic weight throughout the film. It opens and closes the story, acting as a visual metaphor for life's unpredictability, the idea that fate and chance guide us to places we never expected. Screenwriter Eric Roth introduced the feather as his own addition, one not found anywhere in Winston Groom's original novel. That single creative decision helped define the tone of the entire movie and gave it a poetic quality that audiences have never forgotten. Number 3. Lieutenant Dan's legs were removed. One of the film's most emotionally powerful characters presented one of its greatest technical challenges. Gary Sinise was cast as Lieutenant Dan Taylor, a man who loses both legs during the Vietnam War, and the solution to portraying that loss pushed the boundaries of what visual effects could do in 1994. Sinise wore bright blue stockings over his lower legs during filming, allowing the effects team to digitally remove them in post-production. This wasn't simply a matter of cutting the legs out of frame. Artists had to painstakingly rebuild entire backgrounds behind and beneath his body in every shot where his missing limbs would have been visible. The process was enormously time-consuming and required hundreds of hours of meticulous work per scene. The results were so convincing that many viewers assumed Sinise was actually an amputee. His performance helped sell the illusion completely. He moved and carried himself with such authenticity that the technical trickery became invisible. This combination of dedicated acting and cutting-edge effects earned the movie an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, and it remains one of the most impressive actor-to-digital collaborations in Hollywood history. Number 4. Elvis had a secret voice actor. The young Elvis scene is a blink-and-you'll-miss-it moment, but the secret behind it is one of the most surprising hidden contributions in the entire film. The actor seen on screen playing the young Elvis Presley did not provide the voice audiences actually hear. That voice belonged to Kurt Russell, one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars, who dubbed the lines without receiving any on-screen credit. Russell had previously played Elvis in a 1979 television biopic and was considered something of an authority on the King's early mannerisms and speech patterns. When the production needed someone who could authentically capture that young, pre-fame Elvis energy, he was the natural choice. Russell stepped in quietly, recorded his lines, and the contribution went unannounced for years afterward. For most viewers, this remains a completely invisible detail, the kind of secret that reframes the scene entirely once you know it. The uncredited cameo adds a fascinating layer of Hollywood history to an already detail-rich production. It also raises an interesting question: how many other films contain contributions from major stars that audiences have simply never been told about? In this case, the answer was hiding in plain sight for decades. Number 5. The bench was just a movie prop. Few locations in cinema carry the emotional weight of that simple park bench in Savannah, Georgia. The spot where Forrest sits, opens his box of chocolates, and begins telling his life story to complete strangers. But visitors hoping to find that exact bench have discovered a surprising truth. It was never a permanent fixture. The bench was a temporary prop, constructed specifically for the production and placed in Chippewa Square in Savannah for the duration of filming. Once the shoot wrapped, it was removed entirely. The square itself does exist and can be visited, but the original bench has since had an interesting afterlife. It is currently on display at the Savannah History Museum, where fans can see it up close. The filming location has become one of the most visited spots in Savannah, drawing tourists who want to stand where Forrest once sat. Production designers specifically chose Chippewa Square for its classic Southern beauty, and the bench was positioned to frame the character perfectly against the surrounding trees. It's a reminder that some of cinema's most iconic images are built entirely from scratch, and that the magic of a great film can transform an ordinary street corner into something that feels timeless. Number 6. A studio swap saved the film. The story of how Forrest Gump reached the screen is itself a tale of chance and last-minute maneuvering. The project originally sat at Warner Brothers, where it had lingered in various stages of development for years without gaining real momentum. A studio trade deal eventually shifted it to Paramount Pictures, a move that would prove critical to getting the film made at all. Warner Bros. Had acquired the rights to the story, but struggled to shape it into something they wanted to greenlight. When Paramount expressed serious interest, a rare exchange took place. The project was traded over in exchange for another property. It was a straightforward business transaction that neither side likely imagined would alter Hollywood history. Had it stayed at Warner Bros., the movie might have been made with an entirely different director, cast, or creative vision, or it might never have been made at all. Zemeckis was attached under the Paramount arrangement, and his involvement was tied directly to that deal. The casual nature of the trade makes it all the more remarkable. One of cinema's most celebrated films changed hands like a bargaining chip, and nobody involved knew they were negotiating over a future Oscar winner for Best Picture. Number 7. The accent came from a child. One of the most distinctive elements of Forrest's character is his soft, unhurried Alabama drawl, a voice so specific and memorable that it became instantly iconic. What many viewers don't realize is that Tom Hanks didn't develop that voice independently. He modeled it directly on the natural speech of the child actor who played young Forrest, Michael Connor Humphreys. Humphreys, who was from Mississippi, spoke with a genuine Southern accent that the filmmakers loved. Rather than asking the child to adjust his delivery to match what Hanks might eventually do, Zemeckis made the opposite call. Hanks would listen closely to Humphreys and shape his own performance to match the boy's natural voice. It was an unusual approach. Adults typically set the template, not children, but it worked beautifully. The result was a seamless continuity between young and adult Forrest that audiences accepted completely, even if they couldn't quite explain why. Hanks reportedly studied recordings of Humphreys carefully and worked with him directly to internalize the rhythms of his speech. It's the kind of quiet, behind-the-scenes collaboration that rarely gets mentioned in interviews, yet it shaped one of the most recognizable voices in film history. Number 8. Running scenes used a double. The image of Forrest running, arms pumping, baseball cap in place, crossing America's open highways, is one of the film's most enduring visuals. But not every frame of that iconic run actually features Tom Hanks. For wide shots and certain extended sequences, the production brought in a body double to handle the physical demands across long shooting days. That double was Jim Hanks, Tom's younger brother. The two men share a strong physical resemblance, and Jim had the advantage of sustaining the running sequences over greater distances and from angles where a close match to his brother's build and movement style mattered most. Directors of photography used careful framing to ensure the transition between the two performers remained invisible. Most viewers watching the film would never notice the switch, which is precisely the point. The work of a skilled double is defined entirely by its invisibility, and Jim Hanks executed his role with enough precision that the illusion held completely. For attentive fans, there's a rewarding game to be played, identifying the moments where the camera pulls far enough back that the man running across the screen isn't actually the film's star at all. Number 9. His mom was barely older. The casting of a mother figure is always a delicate decision, but this particular choice came with a mathematical complication that could have undermined the emotional core of the story. Sally Field was cast as Mrs. Gump, Forrest's devoted, fiercely loving mother, despite being only 10 years older than Tom Hanks in real life. In the world of the film, Mrs. Gump raises Forrest from childhood through adulthood across several decades. A 10-year gap between an actor and the person playing their parent is extremely narrow, especially when the role demands that the mother appear as a seasoned, wise figure alongside a fully grown adult son. The makeup department faced the challenge of aging Field convincingly while keeping her performance naturalistic and unforced. Field handled the role with such warmth and authority that audiences rarely questioned the age dynamic at all. Her quieter emotional scenes, particularly her later appearances, grounded the story in a way that no amount of makeup alone could have achieved. The casting decision was unconventional by Hollywood standards, but it served the film's emotional needs perfectly. Sometimes the right performer simply defies the numbers on paper, and Field proved that beyond any doubt. Number 10. Travolta turned it down. It is one of those Hollywood decisions that becomes harder to understand with each passing year. Before the role landed with Tom Hanks, it was extended to John Travolta, and Travolta said no. He chose instead to take the role of Vincent Vega in Pulp Fiction, a performance that revived his career and cemented his place in cinema history. Travolta has spoken about the decision in interviews since, acknowledging it as a significant missed opportunity. At the time, his career had been through a difficult stretch, and Pulp Fiction represented something edgier and more unconventional, backed by a director whose reputation was rapidly rising. Both films were released in 1994, making the comparison impossible to avoid. What would the movie have looked like with Travolta in the lead? The answer is unknowable, but the contrast between the two performances makes it one of cinema's great casting hypotheticals. Hanks brought a guileless, gentle quality to the role that earned him his second consecutive Academy Award for Best Actor. Travolta, meanwhile, earned an Oscar nomination for Pulp Fiction. In the end, both actors found their defining 1994 moment, just not in the film the world might have predicted. Number 11. Other directors almost took over. Before Robert Zemeckis came aboard, the director's chair was far from settled. Several filmmakers were approached or considered during the years the project spent in development, each bringing a very different creative sensibility to the material. The version of the story that might have emerged under their direction would likely have been unrecognizable compared to what audiences eventually saw. Among those reportedly considered was Terry Gilliam, the visionary filmmaker known for darkly surreal and unconventional work. Had he taken the helm, the film might have leaned far more heavily into the absurdist elements present in Winston Groom's original novel, a version that would have felt far less warm and considerably more chaotic. Others in the running brought their own stylistic approaches that would have shifted the tone in equally dramatic ways. Zemeckis was ultimately chosen in part because of his proven ability to balance spectacle with genuine emotion, demonstrated clearly throughout the Back to the Future trilogy. His instinct was always to ground the story in human feeling while using technical innovation to serve the narrative rather than overwhelm it. The fact that other directors nearly shaped this film is a reminder of how differently it could have landed, and how much the final result depended on getting that one crucial creative decision exactly right, at exactly the right moment. Number 12. The author didn't profit much. Behind one of Hollywood's greatest financial successes lies a story of deep disappointment. Winston Groom, the novelist whose book gave birth to the entire story, received a modest flat fee for the rights, and when he sought to benefit from the film's extraordinary commercial performance, he ran directly into the brutal mechanics of studio accounting. Groom's deal included a share of net profits, the same arrangement that, as covered in the opening chapter, routinely leaves participants with far less than expected. Despite the film earning over $600 million at the worldwide box office, the studio declared it had not technically generated a net profit under their accounting methods. Groom was reportedly furious, and the episode drew significant public attention to the way studios calculate earnings on blockbuster releases. The contrast with Tom Hanks's gross profit arrangement couldn't be sharper. Hanks walked away with tens of millions. Groom, whose imagination created the character in the first place, received a fraction of that. He later stated he would seek a very different deal before allowing any sequel to move forward. It remains one of Hollywood's most striking examples of the vast gap between a film's cultural impact and the financial reality experienced by the person whose original vision made it all possible in the first place. Number 13. The feather wasn't in the book. It is the image most closely associated with the entire film, a single white feather drifting on the breeze, opening the story and returning at the end to close it. Yet despite its profound connection to the movie's themes, this iconic symbol never appeared anywhere in Winston Groom's original novel. It was born entirely from the imagination of screenwriter Eric Roth. Roth introduced the feather as a framing device to carry the film's central question: how much of life is shaped by destiny, and how much by pure chance? The novel had its own distinct tone, darker, more satirical, and considerably more absurdist, but Roth's adaptation softened those edges and needed a visual metaphor that could anchor the emotional journey without dialogue. The feather filled that role with quiet perfection. The decision to open and close with the same image gave the film a circular, almost poetic structure that resonated deeply with audiences worldwide. It transformed what might have been a straightforward biographical drama into something genuinely contemplative. Roth won the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay, and the feather, his invention, not Groom's, has since become one of the most recognized symbols in modern cinema. Not bad for a single creative idea that didn't exist anywhere in the source material at all. Number 14. A cartoon monkey was considered. The version of the story that audiences came to love is largely grounded and emotionally sincere, but early development painted a very different picture. Winston Groom's original novel was considerably stranger and more surreal than the finished film, and at various points during the adaptation process, some of that bizarre energy threatened to make it into the final script. One of the most unusual proposals involved a cartoon monkey as a recurring companion for the main character. The idea reflected the novel's tendency toward absurdist humor, where Forrest drifts through history with an oblivious detachment that borders on outright satire. A cartoon element would have pushed the production into territory closer to live-action fantasy, something that might have worked as an artistic experiment but would have fundamentally altered the emotional tone that makes the finished movie so effective. Eric Roth's adaptation deliberately moved away from this direction. The decision to strip away the surreal elements and ground the story in genuine human feeling was arguably the most important creative choice made during development. By trading absurdism for sincerity, Roth and Zemeckis found the version of the story that connected with the widest possible audience. The cartoon monkey never progressed beyond the planning stage, and the film is almost certainly better for it. Sometimes the best creative decisions are the ones that never appear on screen, quietly shaping the final product from the shadows of the cutting room. Number 15. A scene was cut for tone. Not every historical encounter written for Forrest made it into the finished film. Among the deleted material was a scene involving Martin Luther King Jr., one that filmmakers ultimately decided crossed a line in how it handled such a profoundly significant historical figure. The decision to cut it reflected a level of creative restraint that quietly shaped the movie's final character. The scene was designed in a similar spirit to the film's other historical cameos, placing Forrest in proximity to a famous moment in American history through digital compositing. But the specific context and tone of the encounter raised concerns about whether it treated King's legacy with the appropriate level of respect. Rather than risk undermining the gravity of the civil rights movement, the filmmakers chose to leave it out entirely. That choice reflects a broader discipline running through the entire production. The film walks a genuinely difficult tightrope, using real historical trauma as backdrop for a fictional story while trying not to trivialize the human cost of those events. Every time it touches on war, political upheaval, or social injustice, the balance between entertainment and sensitivity has to be carefully maintained. The deleted scene stands as a powerful reminder that honoring that balance sometimes meant leaving carefully crafted footage on the cutting room floor, regardless of the effort invested in creating it. Number 16. Vietnam was filmed in the US. The jungles of Southeast Asia, dense, oppressive, and alive with danger, are among the most viscerally effective settings in the entire film. Yet not a single frame of those sequences was shot anywhere near Vietnam. The entire wartime environment was recreated in the swamps and forests of Beaufort, South Carolina, a location that proved surprisingly well suited to standing in for a country thousands of miles away. The production design team worked extensively to transform the South Carolina landscape into something that felt authentically Southeast Asian. Specific vegetation was sourced and planted, waterways were dressed and staged, and the overall environment was carefully managed to eliminate any visual detail that might break the illusion. The region's natural humidity and dense tree cover gave cinematographer Don Burgess the light and atmosphere he needed to sell the deception convincingly. Beaufort had previously served as a filming location for other productions requiring a southern or tropical aesthetic, which gave the crew a logistical foundation to build on. Shooting domestically also allowed far greater control over the environment, scheduling, and safety. Critical considerations for sequences involving large numbers of crew, pyrotechnics, and complex action choreography. The finished scenes carry a raw, immersive quality that few viewers would ever associate with the American South, which is precisely the point, and a testament to what a skilled production team can achieve without ever leaving the country. Number 17. Lieutenant Dan's story was adjusted. Few characters in the film underwent as much evolution between page and screen as Lieutenant Dan Taylor. Gary Sinise brought such depth and specificity to the role during production that the creative team began reshaping scenes around what he was discovering in the character. A collaborative process that pushed the arc in directions the original script hadn't fully anticipated. Several scenes were rewritten or extended during filming to accommodate the emotional complexity Sinise was uncovering. His portrayal of a man defined by his family's military legacy and destroyed by surviving a war he believed he was meant to die in required space that earlier drafts hadn't always provided. Zemeckis gave him that space, and the scenes that emerged from those adjustments became some of the most memorable in the entire production. The rooftop scene during the storm at sea is perhaps the clearest example of how the character grew beyond his original conception. Sinise's raw, almost confrontational energy in that sequence transformed what could have been a straightforward dramatic moment into something genuinely haunting. The willingness of the director and writers to reshape Dan around the actor's instincts rather than forcing the performance into a predefined mold resulted in a supporting character so fully realized that Sinise received an Academy Award nomination, a recognition that reflected just how significantly the character had grown from his original form on the page. Number 18. History scenes were all fake. Watching Forrest shake hands with President Kennedy or appear on a televised talk show alongside real historical figures, audiences in 1994 were seeing something they had genuinely never encountered before. The seamless insertion of a fictional character into authentic archival footage represented a technical breakthrough that pushed the boundaries of what visual effects could achieve, and the methods behind it were as ingenious as the results were convincing. The process involved painstakingly tracking the movement of cameras in original archival footage, then matching that motion precisely so that newly filmed material could be composited into the same frame. Facial tracking, lighting matching, and grain simulation all had to align perfectly to prevent the joins from becoming visible. Industrial Light and Magic, the effects company responsible for the work, spent enormous amounts of time on each sequence, with some individual shots requiring months of refinement. What made the illusion so effective wasn't just the technical execution, it was the writing. Screenwriter Eric Roth constructed each historical encounter so that the real figures reacted to Forrest in ways consistent with their documented personalities. President Kennedy's warmth, John Lennon's wit, and George Wallace's discomfort all felt plausible within their historical contexts. The film won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects that year, but the greatest achievement was that most audiences simply believed what they were seeing, never stopping to question how a fictional man from Alabama had managed to place himself at the center of so many defining American moments. Number 19. Bubba's role grew on set. The character who arguably generates the film's most quoted lines began the production with a significantly smaller presence on the page. Mykelti Williamson brought such natural warmth and comic timing to the role of Bubba Blue that the creative team began expanding his material as filming progressed, a decision that transformed a supporting part into one of the movie's most beloved elements. The extended shrimp monologue, a cascading list of shrimp preparations that builds from amusing to genuinely absurd, grew considerably longer than originally scripted. Williamson's delivery made each addition feel organic rather than forced, and Zemeckis recognized that the audience would follow him through every variation without losing interest. What started as a few lines became a running thread woven through Forrest and Bubba's entire friendship. The decision to give Williamson more room shaped the emotional impact of Bubba's eventual fate far more powerfully than a smaller role ever could have. By the time the film reaches the battlefield sequence, audiences have spent enough time with Bubba to feel his loss genuinely, something that wouldn't have been possible if he had remained the minor figure the early drafts described. Williamson's performance proved that sometimes the most valuable creative decisions happen not in the writing room, but in the moment a gifted actor steps on set and reveals what a character can truly become when given the freedom to breathe and grow. Number 20. The ping pong ball was CGI. One of the film's most entertaining sequences, Forrest's rapid rise as a ping pong champion, was built almost entirely on an illusion. Despite the convincing speed and precision of every rally shown on screen, there was no actual ball in play during filming. The actors trained extensively to perfect their movements and reactions, performing complete exchanges against thin air with no physical object to track. The ball was added entirely in post-production, using early digital animation techniques. Effects artists studied real high-speed ping-pong footage to ensure the trajectory, spin, and bounce of each digitally created ball matched what a genuine match would look like. The timing had to be frame-perfect. Any slight mismatch between the actor's movements and the ball's position would have shattered the illusion immediately. The result is a sequence that plays with effortless energy, giving no indication of the painstaking work behind each exchange. Hanks and his on-screen opponents sold the physicality of the rallies so convincingly that even attentive viewers rarely suspect anything is missing from the frame. It stands as one of the more quietly impressive technical achievements in the film, not because it pushed visual effects into dramatic new territory, but because it succeeded so completely that it never once drew attention to itself, which is perhaps the highest compliment any effects work can receive. Number 21. VFX artists promoted the film. The team responsible for the film's groundbreaking visual effects didn't simply complete their work and move on. They became an unexpected part of the movie's public story. As Forrest Gump grew into a cultural phenomenon following its release, the effects artists at Industrial Light and Magic found themselves in unusual demand, explaining their techniques to journalists, television programs, and behind-the-scenes features with a level of visibility rarely afforded to technical crew. The behind-the-scenes footage and interviews generated around the visual effects became genuine marketing content in their own right. Audiences who had marveled at Lieutenant Dan's missing legs or Forrest's appearances alongside historical figures were hungry to understand how any of it had been achieved, and the production was smart enough to recognize that transparency only deepened the public's fascination rather than diminishing it. The "how did they do that" conversation extended the film's cultural life well beyond its theatrical run. This unusual afterlife for the effects team reflected just how significantly the production had raised the bar for the industry. Studios and filmmakers paid close attention to how audiences responded to seeing the mechanics behind the magic, and the appetite for that kind of behind-the-scenes access helped shape how Hollywood began marketing effects-driven films in the years that followed. What started as technical achievement became something closer to a cultural conversation, one that the effects artists themselves helped lead, turning a production crew into unlikely public ambassadors for a new era of filmmaking. Number 22. A road became a tourist spot. Cinema has a remarkable power to transform ordinary places into destinations, and few films have demonstrated that more clearly than this one. Among the locations most directly affected is a stretch of highway in Monument Valley, Utah, the dramatic backdrop used during Forrest's cross-country running sequence, which has since become widely known as Forrest Gump Point and draws visitors from around the world every year. The specific pullout where the running sequence was filmed offers an iconic view across the valley that tourists now recognize immediately from the movie. Visitors make the journey specifically to stand where Forrest famously stopped running and turned back toward home, recreating the shot for photographs against the same sweeping landscape. The location has become firmly embedded in the broader Monument Valley tourist experience, appearing on maps and travel guides dedicated to film locations across the American Southwest. What makes this particular case so interesting is the contrast between the scene's relatively brief screen time and the lasting geographical impact it produced. The running sequence occupies only a small portion of the film, yet it generated one of the most enduring location pilgrimages in modern cinema tourism. It speaks to the power of a single, well-composed image, one perfectly framed shot of a man at a crossroads, set against an enormous sky, was enough to send generations of viewers across the country on a journey to find that exact same view and stand in the same spot for themselves. Number 23. Bubba's lip was prosthetic. The physical distinctiveness that made Bubba Blue such an immediately recognizable presence on screen didn't come naturally. It required hours of work in the makeup chair before filming could begin each day. The character's prominent lower lip, one of his most visually defining features, was achieved through a custom prosthetic designed and applied by the film's makeup department, transforming Mykelti Williamson's appearance in ways that went far beyond what cosmetics alone could have achieved. The prosthetic added a layer of physical commitment to an already demanding performance. Williamson had to deliver extended, fast-paced dialogue, including the famous shrimp monologue, while wearing an appliance that altered the natural movement of his mouth. The fact that his delivery remained so fluid and expressive under those conditions speaks to the level of preparation and discipline he brought to the role every single day on set. The transformation proved almost too convincing in one respect. Williamson later spoke about the difficulties the role created for his career in the years that followed. Despite a performance widely praised by critics and audiences alike, some in the industry struggled to see past the character's physical appearance, making it harder for him to land roles that demonstrated his range as an actor. It was a deeply personal cost that the finished film never hinted at, a sobering reminder that the most seamless on-screen transformations are sometimes built on real sacrifices that the audience sitting in the theater never gets to see or fully appreciate. Number 24. Bubba Gump became real. Few films have spawned a real-world business empire as directly as this one did. The fictional shrimp company that Forrest builds in Bubba's memory, a touching tribute to a fallen friend, crossed the boundary between story and reality when entrepreneurs recognized its commercial potential and transformed it into an actual restaurant chain. What began as a fictional legacy became a global brand operating across multiple continents. The first Bubba Gump Shrimp Co. restaurant opened in Monterey, California in 1996, just 2 years after the film's release, and the concept expanded rapidly from there. The chain leaned fully into its cinematic origins, decorating each location with memorabilia, movie references, and themed menu items designed to extend the experience of the film into a physical space. Guests didn't just eat, they revisited the story while doing so, turning every meal into a kind of interactive tribute to the movie. Decades later, the chain continues to operate locations across the United States and internationally, making it one of the most enduring examples of a film's fictional world generating tangible, lasting commercial reality. Most movie merchandise fades within a few years of a film's release, but the restaurant chain has outlasted countless imitators precisely because it offers something no piece of merchandise can: an experience. Bubba's dream of a shrimp business, born from a screenplay and brought to life by 2 actors on a film set, turned out to have a longer and more prosperous shelf life than almost anyone involved in the original production could possibly have imagined. Number 25. The chocolates were full of sand. The most quoted line in the entire film, the gentle observation about life and a box of chocolates, was delivered while Forrest held a prop that contained no chocolate whatsoever. For the practical demands of a production day, the iconic box was filled with sand to give it realistic weight and stability during handling, with the individual compartments dressed to look convincing on camera without requiring the crew to manage actual confectionery across multiple takes. Using real chocolate would have created significant continuity problems. Heat, melting, and inconsistency between takes would have made matching shots across a long shooting day extremely difficult. Sand provided the perfect solution. It gave Hanks something with natural heft to handle authentically, while ensuring that every take looked identical regardless of how many times the box was opened, set down, or picked up again. The audience saw chocolate, the actor felt sand. Several versions of the prop box were created for the production, and at least one of them went on to a remarkable afterlife entirely separate from the film itself. When movie memorabilia from the production went to auction, the chocolate box, sand-filled and all, became one of the most sought-after items, eventually selling for a significant sum. The prop that represented life's unpredictability turned out to have its own unpredictable journey, moving from a South Carolina park bench to an auction house to a private collection, carrying the full weight of one of cinema's most enduring stories, and proving that even the simplest objects can take on a life far greater than anyone intended. Forrest Gump was never just a movie about a simple man living an extraordinary life. It was a production defined by audacious gambles, invisible craftsmanship, and creative decisions made in the margins. A studio trade that nearly never happened, effects work that redrew the boundaries of what cinema could show, and performances shaped as much by instinct as by script. Behind every scene that feels natural and unforced lies a story of deliberate, painstaking effort that most audiences never suspected. Every secret uncovered in this video adds another layer to a film that has always rewarded closer attention. What makes these hidden stories so compelling is how they reinforce the film's own central theme, that the most meaningful things are often invisible on the surface. The feather was engineered, the legs were erased, the bench was temporary, the chocolate was sand. And yet none of that artifice diminished the emotional truth the film delivered to hundreds of millions of people worldwide. The illusion was total, and the craftsmanship required to sustain it, from the first frame to the last, was nothing short of remarkable. If anything, knowing how much effort went into creating that illusion of effortlessness only deepens the admiration. If any of these secrets changed the way you see this classic, hit like and subscribe so you never miss another deep dive into the films that shaped cinema history. And let us know in the comments, which of these behind-the-scenes stories surprised you the most?